Hello, designers. We are going to create a new project called the Design Element Infographic. However, the first part is getting into all of the design elements. There's 7 of them. This takes a little while. You can skip forward into whatever chapter you need to. At the very end, we're going to put them all together into one document, displaying all of your creative abilities. So there's 3 points to this. 1 is to play in Photoshop. 2, to learn some new tools and techniques. And then 3, to understand what the elements are. So while you're going through these exercises, hopefully you'll get those 3 things each time. All right, we're going to start with color. Color, if you open up the project, you'll see that color consists of hue, saturation, and value. I'm going to use a website to pick out some color first. Color is kind of a tough one, so pop open a new tab and go to color.adobe.com. And on this site, you'll see a color wheel. This will be an abbreviated version of what we learned in class. So if you're watching this, you're like, yeah, it's probably less than we learned. I'm just going to go through the real basic touch points that you should try. This color wheel should look familiar from when you were painting as a youth. There are 3 or 4 color systems you should try out. Analogous, which means similar. Monochromatic, which means one. Triad, I don't use a whole lot. Complementary is a nice one too. That one should look familiar. Each one of these, the center dot or this white dot, one in the middle, can be moved around and you can pick that color or hue. You can go inward and outward, and that will determine the saturation of the hue. So hue is the first part, and then saturation is the next part. If you want to add white or black, you can dial down the bottom slider. That will create some brightness adjustment. I want to get colors from here to Photoshop. My goal is to make a gradient, and I want to pick colors that go together. Analogous is a great place to start, so I'm just going to pick here, and you can also spread these out. I want this color and maybe this color. Those 2 colors are analogous. They'll probably make a great gradient. Right here is a hex code. I'm going to double click that and copy it. If you haven't started a new Photoshop document for this particular element, here's how you do it. I'm going to go back to Photoshop, go to File, New. My interface looks a little different than yours. This is a legacy interface. I'm going to call this Design Element and then underscore color. I'm going to work in pixels, 1000, not that big, 1072 pixels per inch, RGB color. Hit OK. I'm going to do this over and over again, so you'll get a lot of practice there. I'm going to put my color into this program. Here's one way to do it. I can click on my foreground color right here, that black square. I can click on that, and it'll give me my color picker. I can either choose a color or I can paste. You can notice it's ready for you to paste. You've copied a color code, so I'm going to Control V for paste. There's my purple. Just going to hit OK. I just want it to be there for now. I'm going to go back here, do the same thing. Control C for copy. Go back here, and this time the white square, that's my background color. I'm going to click that once. Control V for paste, and there's my second color. So I have a purple and a pink. I'm going to do a gradient now. I'm actually going to go like this so we are isolated. Gradient, tool, or G. Next, you got to pick what kind of gradient. This is going to be the default. You don't need to change that, but it's wise to play around by clicking that little down arrow. That will twirl down some options. And then you have some types of gradients, linear, radial, and so on. I'm just going to do a linear gradient. Click and drag. That creates a gradient. Pretty cool. And we can adjust our gradient if we want to. I'm going to show you a way to add some difference to that. Right down here is an adjustment layer, this little circle. If you wanted to adjust the hue, let's say. You're like, I'm not quite sure that I want that to be there. I didn't quite nail my gradients. This is going to add an adjustment layer. Move my little square here. And right on top of your layer, this is a layer that's going to adjust what's below it. And we'll do this in a few lessons. This is hue saturation. So if I wanted to, I could change my hue and look at my colors. They're all changing based on this hue. So if I wanted to go to a more orange and red, I could. I could also adjust the saturation, another key component of color, and then the lightness or brightness. So this adjustment layer can be hidden to show your original or reactivated if you want to. Another note, this little white box right here is called a mask, and this is the adjustment. So there's two parts to it. I can click on either one. If I wanted to, I could go on my mask and I could paint. It's kind of a complex topic, but I'm gonna grab the paintbrush, make sure my foreground color is black. I can hit this little double arrow here and I can paint. And what that does, I'm not painting with purple, I'm revealing what's below. So I'm actually carving a hole through this adjustment to show my original. And I can paint with gray or white. If I swap my colors, I can do that. So some interesting things you can do. This main topic was color. Picking colors are tough, but if you use websites like Adobe Color, it makes it easy. I'm gonna save this one. 1 down, 6 to go. File save, and I'm gonna go to my desktop. I'm gonna make a new folder. I'm working on a Mac at home here, so these are called my design elements. Create a new folder, pin that to the left-hand side here so I can easily find that. And then I've already named it, so I'm just gonna hit save. Okay, 1 down, 6 to go. I can close that. My next element is called line. So I'm going to do another document. It usually keeps the specs here, but there we go. Creative Cloud needs to quit. That could cause some problems. Let's see if we can ignore that and keep working. Well, that's awesome when that happens right in the middle of a video. Okay, sometimes Photoshop quits and Creative Cloud needs to repair itself. We're going to wait for that. While that tries to repair itself, I'm going to talk about the next element, which is line. All right, Creative Cloud is restarting, hopefully. Line is a linear mark between two connected points or an edge created when two shapes meet, known as implied line. We're just going to study regular line. We're going to use the brush tool. The brush tool is very complicated and deep, and that's what digital artists use primarily with their work. So learning about line is one of the basic building blocks for their career. So I can start Creative Cloud again. All right, let's get Photoshop going again. I'm going to create another element, and then I'm going to use the brush tool once this starts up. So you can just skip forward to the part where we actually start the lesson. Okay, new. Using F right there to get into my full screen. Okay, line. So I'm going to use the brush tool, just B. And there's a couple of things that you can do right away to make the brush bigger or smaller, or harder or softer. I'm going to get back to my standard brush. So if you press D, you're going to have black as your foreground color, white as your background color, and you can just immediately start painting. If I right click, I get this menu right here. I can increase the size, or I can decrease or increase the hardness. So if I increase the size, you'll notice that little circle gets bigger. All right. There's a better way to do that. Left or right brackets makes brushes bigger or smaller. You can also decrease or increase the hardness. So if I paint one stroke here, that's one line, and I go in and decrease the hardness, that's what that line looks like. It's fuzzy. So hardness controls the edge of the brush. Of course, you can paint with whatever color you want. So if you grab a hue, you have those choices. We also have many brushes to pick from. I have created many brushes, and I have a different sort of set here. But down at the bottom, you'll see that there are general brushes, dry media. I've loaded several of them. And there's all these really cool brushes here. So try some different brushes. I'm going to go back to my standard brush here and just reset. Oops. E for brush. There we go. There's another palette that I want you to try to access. The brushes, brush settings. Which are not opening for me. All right, I'm going to save this. Having some issues today. Sometimes you just got to get a drink of coffee and let the computer not do very well. There we go. Always just go get some coffee. It's usually going to fix things. All right, back to what we were talking about. We have our brush, and then we can control all of the settings of the brush with another panel right here. It's called brush settings. There's so much in here. You can control the shape and the dynamics, the scattering, the texture. So I can go through and click a couple of these things if I wanted to space this out, or if I wanted to scatter my brush, or if I wanted to add a texture to it. I could throw a little texture on top of it. And now when I paint, it's a completely different brush. So just know that you can customize your brushes however you like. Well, that's doing some really crazy stuff. And brushes are a lot of fun. It's a kind of one of those infinite topics. You can also load brushes. I'm going to show you how to do that. Right click, gear, and you can go to get brushes or import them. Get is going to load the Adobe website, which you can download brushes. Import is something you can download brushes. Just Google Photoshop brushes, free, and you'll find a bunch of them. The last part is I'm going to show you how to make your own brush, kind of a fun thing to do. You'll need an image, and just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to create this sort of design. You can take a photograph if you want to. Actually, let's do that. I'm gonna take a screenshot of my picture. I think that would be more fun. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little screenshot, and I'll let go. So I'll do something like this. Okay, I've copied that. I didn't even know what face I was gonna make. Sweet. Make that bigger. I'm just gonna kind of isolate my face, delete everything else. Quickly just have my drawing tablet. I'm just gonna go around this guy real fast. So I have a face. I'm going to make it black and white using adjustment layers, or basically an adjustment layer, but a quicker way. We'll get into what those are. So you can make a brush out of just about everything, photographs or other prints. So I'm going to then select the thing that I want to make into a brush. So let's say I want a brush that's that. I'm going to define a brush right now. Define brush preset. And then I could name it. Okay. I'm just going to delete that. And then now if I get my brush, it's like a stamp. And I can also make that bigger or smaller. I can paint with it. I can choose different colors. I can overlay them. So line is a very deep, interesting topic. You can use brushes to connect points in all sorts of ways. So I'm going to be done with this. Maybe I'll do a couple of huge stamps to kind of make something interesting. So my final tile is like that. Okay. So I'm going to save there, close, on to the next one. Shape. Shape is formed when a two-dimensional line encloses an area. We've used shape for a long time in our lives, so we're going to go make a new new Photoshop file. Just Control N. Let's see, design element shape. Right. The shape, we're going to use the shape tool. Shape tool is down here. There, it should be a rectangle that you see. What this does is when you click and drag, it creates a new layer. It's called a shape layer. And these shape layers have properties. You might get a property panel. I'm going to close that because the properties are up here. I don't need more stuff on my screen. Shapes can be filled with colors. You can create a stroke on that shape, and you could increase or decrease the line of that shape, the stroke thickness, of that shape. You can also change the stroke pattern. There are multiple shapes. So there's polygons. You can create stars. I think we learned the other day. Circles or ellipses. And every time you draw, it creates a new shape layer based on your last color. There's another tool that you'll start getting familiar with, which is the pen tool. Pen tool creates shapes. Make sure this setting right here is set to shape, not path. And I'm just going to pick a gradient this time. Preset. There we go. Something like that. I'm going to create one with no stroke. So this little white box with the red line is none. And then the pen tool works like this, a couple of different ways. You can click and release, click and release, click and release, and then close. Now you have a custom shape. You can also hold Command or Control and modify that shape. I can change the color later to any of these shapes if I want to. That's a cool part about shapes. Pen tool works another way. Click and hold, click and hold, click and hold, close it, click and hold. Now you have curvy lines. So very interesting. These are Bezier curves, Bezier handles. We'll learn more about that in Adobe Illustrator. All right, so I want you to create some shapes on your page, however you want those to look. And you can create like a stained glass look if you want to, but spend a little time with your shapes. Not sure how that got turned on. There we go. So now we're done with shapes. I'm going to save that. All right, the next one is value. Value refers to the lightness or darkness, otherwise known as tone of a color. I'm going to create a new document there. Design element value. 1000 value. I want you to grab an image of a face. So I'm going to go to Unsplash. that in. And then look for an image of a person's face. So I would just type in like portrait. All right. This one's interesting. I'm going to always download the largest one possible. So that's going to go to my desktop, but you might have yours going to your downloads. Here's an easy way. I'm just going to drag and drop that. If you can, great way to get images into your document. I also want that to be large. So I'm going to make that very big. And I just want the face to be like centered like that. Okay. The next part of this is to create a black and white version of this. So this is where I'm going to show a little bit more adjustment layers. Down at the bottom here, you have your adjustment layer ability. You can create a new adjustment layer. So it's that little circle. Click that and then choose black and white this time. And it's going to give you the option of making a black and white image. And you can adjust all of the tones within that photo. It's a way better way to make black and white artwork than just desaturating. We're learning value. Value is the difference between the lights and the darks in your image. And the more contrast and the more difference you can give your image, the more dynamic it will be. If it's flat and there's no value in your image, it's boring. So create a lot of difference. I like what this looks like. I'm going to close my properties. We're going to do something interesting here. And I'm going to merge this down. So I have an adjustment layer, and that's a temporary thing. I can turn it off and on. I can also merge it down or merge layers together. The way you do that is you access this little tiny menu here. So I'm going to select my adjustment layer and then go to merge down. If that's not, then you can merge visible. So now I have one layer that's black and white. It's kind of permanently baked in there, and that's okay. Trying something interesting here. Go to filter, pixelate, color halftone, and you get to choose the radius here. This is going to emulate how printed magazines and newspapers are produced. It's going to create dots. I'm going to choose 10 this time, and it creates this halftone dot pattern. If you don't like the radius, you can choose another one. So I'm going to do smaller this time. Let's say 6. If you zoom in, all you see is dots. That's how things are printed. It's a neat design trick to use. You'll probably start seeing these things out there. Another thing you can do is, since we're dealing with cyan, magenta, yellow, and black dots, CMYK, you can go in and do another adjustment layer and do another black and white, and then you can control. If I wanted to control just the cyan dots, I could do that. Make those brighter or darker. Magenta dots, yellow dots, and then all of it would be black dots. So you could crank up everything else. All right. So value can be stretched to its extreme. You can also add some interesting things through the filter menu. All right. Save that. Value. Okay. The next one's texture. I want you to find 3 textures. So I'm just going to Google texture. And I'm going to save 3. They can have, watermarks on them. I'm just going to drag these to my desktop so they're easy to pull into my work. So there's 1, there's 2, and maybe like a paper texture. That's cool. They don't have to be anything particular. They don't have to be color or anything, but that is what we're working with there. So I have my 3 textures. I'm going to start a new file. Design element texture. All right. All right. I'd like you to drag all 3 of those in there. Here's an easy way to do it. Drag and drop. Hit enter, enter, enter. So now you have 3 layers right there. All right, let's isolate this. Before I get started, I'd like some color on my background because the way this works is if you have a white background, it's not as fun. So I'm going to just hide my 3 texture layers and go to my background and create a gradient. We've done that before. So I'm just going to grab my gradient tool and maybe I grab some reds and just throw a gradient on that. There we go. You can create computer-made textures if you want to. Texture is, if we look at the definition here, it is the surface quality of a shape. And you can have a tactile surface or a implied surface. We're creating implied because we can't actually feel it, but it's a great element to add to your work. If you're thinking like things are boring, add some texture. It's a good go-to. All right, back to the work here. Background layer. I'm gonna put a filter on this background that has some noise. I like this noise one here. Add noise. And you can see it adds a grain to it. So really quick way to add something that looks like it feels. Okay, I'm going to turn on one of my textures. Make it big. And this is where we start learning about adjustment or blending modes. I want this to blend with my background. Right now it's completely covering it up. Change your layer from normal to anything else. I'm going to go with maybe multiply. And you can see that the top texture is blending with my color and my texture from below. Pretty interesting. So you can choose, I like multiply or like overlay. And you can see you'll get a preview of what that's going to look like. Divide's cool. Okay, I want you to do the same thing with the others. I want to be able to see all of my textures, so I can see all 3 textures there. And then the trick is getting this third one to cooperate. So I'm just going to repeat this process, this paper. How can I see? Oh, that's kind of neat. I can see all of them there. So with just some simple textures and some blending modes, I've created this brand new texture that's never been made ever before. And that is an implied texture. I'm going to save that. All right, making sure that I have all my documents here that I'm working through. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, color, line, shape, texture, value. Okay, next one is space. I'm actually going to do size next because I like space for last. Okay, size is the relationship between objects with respect to the number and size. So I'm going to find a banana and an object. If you want to make your life a little easier, find it on a white background. Copy, easy way to do it. Go back to Photoshop, new document. It's going to be the design element of size. Paste. So 2 things I need to do. I need to isolate my object from the background, and then I need to start building out my size. Here's a trick that I like to use. Either turn off the background layer or make the background layer gray. Alt or Option Delete will fill a layer with your foreground color. So I picked a gray, it went right there. I pressed Option or Alt and then hit Delete, and it fills a layer or selection with the color. If you don't remember that, Edit Fill is a great way to do it. I need to get this white out of here. We've learned lots of selection techniques. Here's another one. Eraser, magic eraser. Bam. It gets rid of solid colors. So try it with solid colors. Okay. So I'm learning size. I need to do 3 things with size. I need to overlap. I need to create size difference, a difference in scale, and then blurring helps as well. So this is my foreground banana. Should be the largest one, probably towards the bottom, but it doesn't really matter as long as it's large. I'm going to Alt or Option drag. This is one way to make a copy. If you don't like that, you can press Control or Command J. That also makes a copy. Alt dragging is a great way to make a copy very fast. I want this to be below, so I'm going to drag that down right there. and I need it to be smaller. So I'm going to Control T and transform. I just want that to be overlapping somehow, some way. Okay, so it's smaller, it's overlapping, and now I'm going to blur it a little bit. Filter, blur. I use Gaussian blur quite a bit. Don't want it to be that blurry, so maybe like a 3 or a 2. A little blurry. Right. Duplicate this process 3 more times. Blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to do like 4 this time. And blurrier. You can go off the page if you want to. Filter, Gaussian blur. And then one more. This one's in the way back. There are keyboard shortcuts for moving things up and down the stack. If you're interested, let me know. This one should be the blurriest of them all. Blur, Gaussian blur. And do like a 10 on this. There we go. This emulates depth of field. So if I'm looking at something right here, our eyes focus here, but then things in the background get blurry. We can also do this with camera lenses. So it's emulating size. All right. That one is done. And save. Last one is going to be space. Let's take a look at space. Refers to the area of a design in which it's organized. Kind of a vague term, so I'm going to grab an object. Let's do a basketball. On a white background, that's going to work. I'm going to just copy that guy, go back to Photoshop, make a new document, and size. And we have that right there. I'm going to paste this in there. Got to do the same thing. Isolate the background. This one was a PNG, so I didn't have to do any work. If you want to save yourself some time, try to type in PNG and it might save you some time. I want this to be small and kind of up here. All right. Create 5 copies of this and purposefully stagger their position and how far away they are from each other. Kind of like that. They're just random. The point of that is to show that the computer can help you out in a lot of ways as far as space goes. Space is the space in between, the space outside, the space that you're trying to fill. Spacing is a word we use, so this term is used quite a bit. I want to select all my layers. If you click the top layer and hold Shift and click the bottom one, it'll select the whole range. I have all of them selected, and I can move them if I want to. I can also come right up here and align them. They're perfectly aligned to the left now. I can also distribute them. They're perfectly distributed amongst each other's centers. Look at that. All right, I can also click and drag all 5 of those. If I hold Shift down, it goes perfectly to the right. I'm going to just do that a few more times. I'm eyeballing this, but you can also, if you want to, arrange these perfectly using groups. So I noticed that my spacing here is different than here, so I'm going to actually click the very top layer, scroll down, Shift click the bottom. Now I have all of them, and I'm going to move them into position. If you want to, you can create a neat background as well. I don't like that. I'm going to try to pick something that goes with. There we go. Okay, that's your last design element, size. Oops, space. Space. All right, those are your design elements. Look for another video on how to arrange these in an infographic.